My name is June Mallory. I'm 67 years old, a retired school librarian, and a mother to one son, Nathan. I've spent most of my life organizing shelves, mending pages, and whispering to children that they can be whoever they dream of, if they keep reading. But no book I've ever read, no story I've ever taught, prepared me for the sentence that would come out of my future daughter-in-law's mouth. Not in my wildest chapters. It happened one day before their wedding. I remember it so clearly, like ink pressed too hard into paper. You can feel the imprint long after the words are gone. I was at their house, in the dining room, folding linen napkins, white ones, soft cotton, the kind that wrinkle if you so much as breathe on them. Erica had wanted swan-shaped folds. I had watched 3 YouTube tutorials to get them right. Nathan was upstairs getting fitted for his tuxedo. The house smelled of vanilla candles and fresh paint. I stood at the dining table, arranging the last set, when I heard heels behind me. I turned. Erica was in her rehearsal dress, pearl gray silk, hair in soft waves. She looked perfect. She didn't smile. She just looked at me, looked through me, and said, in the calmest voice I've ever heard from her, "The greatest gift for our wedding would be if you disappeared from this family." That's exactly what she said, not suggested, not hinted at. Disappear. I didn't flinch, but my fingers trembled slightly around the last napkin. I felt it crumple under my palm. She didn't wait for me to respond. She just kept going. This weekend is supposed to be about love, about joy, not tension. And honestly, your presence, it complicates things. That's when Nathan walked in. My son, my only child. My boy who once cried when he thought I forgot his 6th birthday. My boy who once asked if I'd sit with him during fire drills because loud noises scared him. He saw us, saw the silence between us, and instead of asking what was wrong, he rubbed the back of his neck and said, "It's probably for the best, Mom. You've been tense lately." Tense. I stood there, my eyes moving from one face to the other. Neither looked angry. They just looked done. As if I had already been dismissed, and this was a formality. I didn't say anything. I looked at the table, at the single chipped teacup, mine, that I had used that morning. It was white porcelain, rimmed with faded blue, a gift from my husband on our 25th anniversary. He used to say it looked delicate, but held heat like stone. That teacup sat in front of me now, half full of forgotten tea, growing colder by the second. I picked it up. Steady hands this time, and I walked out of the room. Not one word, no scream, no pleading, no "how could you?" Just steps. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy. I packed my things quietly. No fuss. I didn't slam doors. I didn't sigh loudly in hopes someone would chase me. They didn't. And as I closed the door behind me, my own son's front door, I whispered not to them, but to myself. They asked me to disappear. So I did, but not without taking back what was mine. They thought I left quietly. They had no idea what was coming. Not yet, but they would. The hotel room was small, the kind that tries too hard to feel warm. Patterned curtains, fake leather armchair, 2 sad chocolates wrapped in foil on the nightstand. But it was clean, quiet, and tonight it was mine. I set the chipped teacup gently on the table near the window. It didn't match anything in the room. Its edges looked too worn, its story too long for a place like this. But still, it sat there, just like me. The clock read 9:47 p.m. Too early for sleep, too late to start anything new. So I sat. I wrapped the hotel robe tighter around my shoulders and watched my reflection in the window. Outside, headlights passed. Inside, I didn't move. My face looked unfamiliar. Tired, but not defeated. Just finished. I used to think that if I loved hard enough, they'd never leave. That kindness, poured long and steady like tea, would keep people close. That belief began with Nathan. When Robert, my husband, died, I remember lying in our bed with Nathan pressed against my chest. He was 9. He didn't cry at the funeral. Not once. But that night, he couldn't stop. He sobbed until he hiccuped, and I didn't know what to do. So I got up and went to the kitchen. I made tea. Just the way Robert used to make it. Strong, 2 sugars, a splash of milk. I poured it into that same chipped cup. The one he bought me on our 25th anniversary from a little roadside shop in Vermont. He said it looked like me. Simple, sturdy, soft at the edges. I didn't know whether to be flattered or offended. I sat beside Nathan on the bed and handed him the cup. He didn't drink it, just held it in both hands, warmth between fingers, still crying. And then he asked the kind of question that cracks something in you. Are we still a family? I looked him in the eye and said, yes. As long as we take care of each other, we'll always be a family. He nodded, set the teacup down, and leaned into me. Fell asleep on my shoulder. I stayed up all night. I had no idea how I'd pay the mortgage, how I'd keep the lights on. But I knew I'd do it. Somehow. Because that's what mothers do. We hold the walls up until our hands bleed. We patch the roof with pieces of ourselves. We become the ground they walk on until they forget we're there. I blinked and came back to the present. The hotel lamp flickered slightly. The heat kicked on. I thought of Erica's face. Calm, composed, entitled. And Nathan's eyes. How he looked away when she spoke those words to me. How he didn't argue. Didn't reach for me. Didn't even say goodbye. My son. My only child. The boy who once cried into my cardigan and asked if we were still a family. I had answered too quickly, because now I wasn't so sure. I stood and crossed to the window, pressed my palm against the glass. The night outside was quiet. No one knew that just hours ago I had been erased, not screamed at, not thrown out, just gently erased. That's the kind of pain that doesn't bruise. It lingers under the skin, soft and sour. I turned back to the room and looked at my suitcase, still zipped. My shoes lined up neatly beside it. And then, my eyes found the teacup again. It had a faint crack running along one side. Hard to notice unless you knew where to look. But it was still whole, still useful, still mine, like me. I walked over, picked it up, and whispered softly, yes. We're still a family, just not the same kind anymore. And I took a sip. 3 years ago, I sat in the bank with my palms sweating. The banker slid over the withdrawal form, and the number stared back at me like a final goodbye. $92,000. Every penny from my retirement fund. Every hour I had worked since Nathan was a toddler. Every missed vacation, every coupon clipped, every time I told myself, it's okay, June, this can wait. But it wasn't just money. It was belief. A belief that if I gave enough, they'd never let me feel like a burden. That if I poured love in the form of sacrifice, they'd always pour it back as care. Nathan had looked so excited that day. His hand trembled as he held Erica's. We found the house, Mom. It's in Glendale. Erica loves the garden. There's even a sunroom, perfect for you to read your books. Erica smiled politely, but didn't meet my eyes. She never really did. The plan was simple. I'd help with the down payment. They'd get the mortgage. And in return, I'd have the in-law suite. They said it'd be our home. Family living together. Just like the old days. But I remember the moment I hesitated. I had pulled out the folder with legal documents my husband, Richard, had once carefully labeled. That's when I called Paulina. Paulina had been Richard's law partner before he passed. She was sharp, no nonsense, and always 2 steps ahead. "June," she said over the phone, "you need to have something in writing, even if it's your son, especially if it's your son. Make sure your name is on the title, or at the very least, a loan agreement." I had relayed that to Nathan hesitantly. He chuckled and shook his head. "Mom, paper? You think I'm going to kick you out or something?" He laughed. Erica didn't. "I mean, come on. We're family," he said. "You'll always have a place with us. You don't need to sign anything. It's not like we're strangers doing business. It's just home, that word again. Home." And I, like a fool, folded. I tucked away Paulina's number in my wallet. Didn't call her back. I nodded, signed the check, and whispered to myself, "It's okay. This is love." But looking back now, I wonder, was it? Because love doesn't come with smirks at dinner when you ask why your name isn't on the mailbox. Love doesn't look away when you mention you feel like a guest in the house you helped them buy. And love doesn't call your vintage tea set junk when you try to unpack it into the sunroom, your sunroom. It wasn't until weeks after moving in that I realized there was no in-law suite being built. The plans had suddenly changed. Erica needed the room for her art studio. Nathan just forgot to mention it. I took the small guest room in the back instead. They had installed blinds so tight they barely let the sun in. The sunroom remained locked when Erica wasn't home. I told myself, it's temporary. They're just stressed. Young couples need space. But what I couldn't say out loud, not even to myself, was this. $92,000 wasn't unconditional love. It was trust. And I had nothing to prove that trust had ever existed. No name on the deed, no clause, no contract. Just a quiet mother's belief that her presence alone would be enough. And that's the thing about unspoken agreements. They're only as strong as the people who honor them. Now, years later, as I sat in this dim motel room, the same one I had passed every day on my walk to the grocery store, I finally understood something. They hadn't betrayed me the day they told me I wasn't invited to the wedding. Number. The betrayal started long before. It began the moment they smiled and told me to trust them, while carefully removing every legal footprint I might have left behind. But what they didn't know is that I never threw away Paulina's number. It was still tucked behind my expired AARP card. And after all this time, Paulina still picked up on the second ring. I stared at the hotel ceiling all night, the cheap popcorn texture flickering in and out of shadow as the streetlights changed outside. I didn't cry. I didn't even toss and turn. I just stared. And when the sky began to turn that pre-dawn shade of gray, I picked up my phone and did what I should have done 3 years ago. I called Paulina. It went to voicemail at first, but 2 minutes later, her number lit up my screen. "June?" she asked, her voice groggy but concerned. "Everything all right?" I didn't bother sugarcoating it. "I need you to check the title of the house Nathan and Erica live in." I said, my voice flat. The one I transferred $92,000 for. Paulina was silent for a moment. You're finally asking me to do what I suggested back then, huh? Yes. I heard rustling on the other end, her moving quickly now. June, if I recall correctly, you never removed your name from the co-ownership clause. Nathan handled the paperwork, but Erica never signed the quitclaim deed. Let me verify. I exhaled slowly, my eyes still fixed on the ceiling. I remembered that day vividly. Nathan had brushed off the idea of paperwork like it was insulting. Me, paperwork? We're family. This house is your home too. Always. And I had smiled, believing him. 5 minutes later, Paulina was back. Your name is still on the deed. You are still legally a co-owner. And that means... I want to initiate a partition action, I said, before she could finish. Paulina paused. Are you sure, June? I'm not retaliating, I said calmly. I'm just reclaiming what was mine. The silence on her end said everything. Not surprise, not judgment, just quiet understanding. I'll prepare the documents, she said. We'll request a forced sale. Since you're co-owner and no formal agreement locks you into joint occupancy, you can legally dissolve the shared ownership and demand your portion in cash. I sat up then, finally. My back ached. My legs felt stiff. But I felt rooted, clear. Paulina continued. Do you want to wait until after the wedding? No, I said. Let them have their dream wedding. Let everything stay perfect until the real mail arrives. When the court order hits their doorstep, I want it to be the first surprise they didn't plan. Got it. I'll file within 48 hours. I ended the call and stood, my bare feet touching the cold tile of the motel floor. A weak beam of morning light crept through the cheap blinds, dust floating lazily in its path. I didn't feel vengeful, not angry, not even sad. Just done. All those years of giving, sacrificing, softening my voice, shrinking my needs, making sure I didn't rock the boat. I had done it thinking they'd remember, that it meant something. But now, I understood something simple. People don't remember foundations. They only look at what stands above them. And maybe it was time to let the house fall. I walked to the small kitchenette and poured myself a cup of stale motel coffee. It was bitter, overbrewed, harsh, but I sipped it like a small ceremony. I remembered when Nathan was 10 and asked me if I would ever leave him. Never, I'd said, kissing his forehead. Even if the house falls down, I'll stay with you in the rubble. But now the house hadn't just fallen. It had collapsed on top of me, and I was crawling out from under it. Paulina texted me a few hours later, a copy of the preliminary court filing. We'll serve them Monday, it read. Let me know if you want a restraining clause too. I typed back, not yet. Let's see how they respond to this first. That night, as I got ready for bed in the small, quiet room, I reached for the tea mug again, the one with the hairline crack. I filled it with peppermint tea and held it between my palms. Nathan used to drink from this mug when he was little. It had always been the comfort mug. The mom, I had a bad dream mug. The my stomach hurts mug. The I miss dad mug. Now it was mine, again. And maybe that was enough for now. That night, I couldn't sleep. The lights in the hotel room were dim, casting long shadows on the wall that moved with the flickering TV I wasn't really watching. My tea had gone cold. I kept hearing the echo of Erica's voice. It's not personal, June. It's just not the right vibe. That word, vibe. Since when did being a mother fall out of style? I reached for my phone and hesitated for a moment before dialing. The name had sat in my contacts for years, untouched. Ruth Ann Kelly, my late husband's closest friend, and a woman I had always admired from afar. She picked up on the second ring. June, she said softly. It's been a long time. I didn't know who else to call, I admitted, voice trembling more than I wanted. You don't need a reason. Just tell me what's weighing you down. So I did. I told her everything. From the text to the smile on Erica's face to the way Nathan avoided my eyes when I walked away. I told her about the hotel room, the silence, the tea that tasted like nothing. There was a pause. Then Ruth Ann said something that landed like a quiet truth in the middle of all my noise. People don't change because you keep rescuing them, June. They change when no one comes to save them. I closed my eyes. Let it sink in. All those years I thought if I just kept showing up, loving harder, forgiving faster, they would see me. They would protect me like I protected them. But all I did was cushion their fall, and they never learned how to stand up. Maybe I was wrong to believe love was enough, I whispered. No, she replied. You weren't wrong. You were just generous. But even generosity needs boundaries. Otherwise, it becomes self-erasure. Her words tore something open in me, but gently. Not like a wound, more like a bandage finally being peeled back. I feel like I failed, I said. You didn't fail, June. You just finally ran out of rope. And that's not weakness. That's your soul asking to be rescued by you. I stared at the window. The streetlights blurred behind tears I didn't know I'd been holding. Then Ruth Ann added, almost like she'd been waiting to say it. Sometimes walking away is the most generous thing we can do. Not for them, but for ourselves. We sat in silence after that, two widows breathing on opposite ends of a phone line, both familiar with the quiet ache of motherhood and sacrifice. Ruth Ann told me how, after her husband passed, her children grew cold. She tried to hold them together for years. Birthdays, holidays, reconciliations. Until one day, she stopped calling, and no one noticed. That was the day she began living again. Did they ever come back? I asked. They did. Years later. But I wasn't the same woman waiting on the porch with cookies anymore. I was a woman with a life, with peace, with a locked front door. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time that day. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me. Just promise me one thing, June. Anything. Don't bleed anymore to prove your family. If you have to hurt to stay, then maybe it's not your home anymore. We said goodnight. I didn't hang up right away. I just sat there, holding the phone like it was her hand. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a mother mourning the loss of her children. I felt like a woman finally waking up. I didn't leave with rage. I didn't even slam a door. That morning, the house was quiet. So quiet, it almost made me forget what had happened. But quiet wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that settles over a battlefield after everyone's gone home, leaving only wreckage behind. I walked through the kitchen one last time. The scent of last night's roast lingered, faint and familiar. I opened the cupboard and picked up the small blue and white teacup I'd used every morning since moving in. It had a tiny chip on the rim, just enough to make Erica wrinkle her nose when she saw it. But to me, it was comfort. Familiar. Mine. That was all I took with me. I'd made my decisions at dawn. A single cup of tea, one deep breath, and I was ready. My first call was to the venue coordinator. "Hi, this is June Whitmore. I'd like to cancel the booking under my name for the 22nd. She sounded startled. "The wedding?" "But everything's arranged, Mom. Paid in full. Are you sure?" "Yes. I'm sure next was the florist. Then the string quartet, the caterer, the event photographer. All contracts under my name, all arranged through me. And each one canceled, refunded, or legally terminated within the hour. None of them argued. They'd all dealt with me directly. I was the one who'd signed the checks, negotiated the contracts, built their trust. Not Erica, not Nathan. Me. I left a voicemail with the wedding planner, a soft, professional woman who'd always treated me kindly, even when Erica barked over details. I simply said, "There's been a change in the family. The bride and groom may still wish to proceed, but all services provided by my end, venue, flowers, catering, entertainment, are no longer funded by me. I wish them well." Then I packed. No cardboard boxes, no suitcases even. Just a single weekender bag, a few essentials, a photo of my late husband, and that chipped teacup wrapped gently in a dish towel. I didn't go upstairs to say goodbye. I knew they were still asleep, or pretending to be. Cowards rarely confront the consequences of their cruelty. Before I stepped out, I took one last look at the dining table. That was where it had happened, where Erica had said it. The sentence that still rang in my ears. "You're not classy enough to sit with his family." Funny how people can shatter you with just a few syllables. And yet, when you pick up the pieces, you realize some shards were never worth keeping. I sat down at the table and unfolded the small piece of paper I'd written on in the early morning light. In simple handwriting, steady, deliberate, I wrote, "You asked me to disappear. This is me, disappearing, with my name, my money, and my dignity." I placed it right where she had been sitting when she said those words, right by her untouched wine glass. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a mirror. I didn't need to scream or explain. I didn't need a dramatic exit. The silence would be enough. The absence of me, of what I had built, provided, protected, would speak louder than any accusation ever could. I slipped out the front door and closed it gently behind me. No slamming, no tears. Just that small click of the lock sliding into place. My car was parked down the street, not in the driveway. I didn't want them waking up to the sight of me leaving. Let them think I vanished into air. Let them wonder. As I drove away, I passed the bakery where I'd ordered the wedding cake, a 5-tiered red velvet with buttercream roses, paid in full, canceled. They had already begun baking. I felt no guilt, no second thoughts. Erica had made her choice. Nathan had watched in silence. And I had simply responded in kind. At a red light, I looked down at my hands on the wheel. Older now, more wrinkled than I remembered, but steady, capable, still strong enough to turn the tide of my own life. I wasn't running away. I was stepping into clarity. When I reached the hotel I'd reserved, under an alias just for discretion, I checked in, unpacked my little bag, and made myself a cup of tea. That chipped teacup sat warm in my palms as I looked out at the city skyline. I didn't cry. I didn't replay the argument. I didn't wonder if they missed me yet. All I did was breathe and reclaim space for myself. They wouldn't understand it now, maybe not even years from now, but the truth was simple. Sometimes, walking away isn't defeat. Sometimes, it's the most generous thing we can do, especially when we leave behind a silence so loud. It echoes in every room we're no longer in. I spent the night at a quiet bed and breakfast in Savannah. It was a place I used to stay with Robert when we'd take weekend drives. It smelled like lemon soap and old cedar. And for the first time in weeks, I breathed without bracing for impact. My phone had been buzzing nonstop, but I let it ring. No more answering calls just because someone needed something. By morning, there were 12 missed calls from Nathan, 5 from Erica, and a couple from numbers I didn't recognize. Vendors, probably. I poured myself a cup of tea and listened to the first voicemail. Nathan's voice, clipped and sharp. "Mom!" "Call me back." "What is going on? You canceled the venue? Why would you do that? What are you trying to prove?" I deleted it without reacting. Then Erica's first message came through. Syrupy, forced calm. "Hi, June. We just found out about the changes. There must be some mistake. Please call the planner and fix it." Then came another. "Okay, this is getting out of hand. You've canceled the band? The florist said you told them the wedding's no longer happening." "That's not your call, June. It's my wedding." I took another sip of tea and looked out at the garden. A pair of robins were pecking around in the hydrangeas. Peaceful, unbothered. "This is sabotage," Erica snapped in the next voicemail. "You're ruining everything. 200 guests, my dress, the cake. Do you understand what you've done? You are making a scene." Another ping. Nathan again. "Mom, I need to know where you are." "We can't get into the house. The keys don't work. Are you there? Are you okay?" Of course they couldn't get in. Paulina had already changed the locks and served the notice. I'd left copies of the legal documents with the wedding planner's assistant, with a polite note, "Please redirect any further questions to my attorney." Another message. This time, Erica's voice sounded different. Brittle. Fragile. "I didn't mean forever. I just thought you'd understand. I thought you'd still do what's best for Nathan. You always do. Please, June. Please call me." It was almost laughable. The swing from entitled outrage to desperate backpedaling. But it wasn't funny. Not really. It was tragic. They thought I would bend again, that I would feel guilty enough to clean up the mess, to fix what they broke with their pride. They had no idea what it cost me to finally say no. And still, even after everything, a small, aching part of me still longed to hear a different message, one that said, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." Or maybe just, "I miss you." But none of that came. Instead, there was one last voicemail. Nathan's voice cracked at the edges now. The anger had drained out. "Mom, please, just tell me you're safe. That's all I want right now." I stared at the phone for a long time after that, and then, slowly, I powered it off. The knock came just after sunset. I had been sitting by the window of the modest hotel suite, a glass of lukewarm chamomile tea in my hand, and silence wrapped around me like a heavy shawl. I wasn't expecting anyone. Nathan had stopped calling. Erica's messages had gone quiet. That kind of silence could only mean one thing. Shame had finally settled in. But I hadn't anticipated Patricia. I opened the door to see her standing there. Erica's mother, hair perfectly set, pearls at her neck, and in her hand, a bottle of wine. Not the celebratory kind. No, this was the kind you bring when words aren't enough. "June," she said softly, her eyes carrying the weight of something unsaid. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked past me like someone entering a chapel, reverent and unsure. She sat, placed the wine on the coffee table, and finally looked at me directly. "I didn't raise her to be cruel," Patricia began, her voice low. "But I never taught her what it meant to lose either. Maybe that's my failure." The honesty caught me off guard. She twisted the cork slowly, not looking at me. Erica always got what she wanted. Nathan, the career, the spotlight. And when she didn't, she found someone to blame. Usually me. I didn't respond. Not yet. She poured herself a glass, but didn't sip it. "I heard about what she said to you," she continued, "and what she did. June. I'm ashamed. Deeply." For a moment, I saw in her the older version of my own reflection. The quiet endurance, the need to hold the family together, even as it cracked from the inside out. "I'm sorry," she said. I finally spoke. "You don't need to apologize for her, Patricia. She made her choices. She'll live with them." Patricia's eyes filled, and she blinked them back. "That's just it. I spent half my life apologizing for my daughter, smoothing over the messes, making excuses. But after what she did to you, I realized I can't keep doing that. I won't." I nodded slowly. "I understand. I just—" She paused, then reached into her purse. "I know this won't fix anything, but I want to help. With whatever you need. I have savings. I'll make it right." She held out a folded check. My name was on it, 5 digits. I looked at it for a long moment, then back at her. "No." She blinked. "June." "No," I repeated, firmer this time. "This isn't yours to fix. And it's not about money. It never was." She folded the check back into her purse, shoulders slumping slightly. There was no offense in her expression, only respect, a quiet understanding. "I wanted to do something," she whispered. "You did," I said. "You showed up. You told the truth. That's more than your daughter managed." Patricia gave a dry, sad laugh. "You know, when Erica was 12, she once screamed at me in the middle of a department store because I wouldn't buy her a leather jacket. She said, 'You're ruining my life.' I cried in the car for an hour afterward." She stared into her untouched wine. I should have let her learn disappointment. Maybe then she would have known what grace looks like. I sat beside her, careful with my words. She still can. "But that's not on you, or me. That's on her." Patricia turned to me, her voice trembling. "Do you think she realizes what she's lost?" I met her eyes. "Not yet. But she will. The thing about people like her is, they don't see the hole until they fall into it." A silence hung between us then, not heavy, but mutual. 2 mothers, 2 women carrying different regrets but meeting at the same crossroad. The decision to stop bleeding for people who never even saw the wounds. She stood slowly, smoothing her skirt. "I suppose I'll go. I just wanted you to know you're not alone in this." "I know," I said softly. "And thank you for coming." At the door, she turned back one last time. "You were a good mother to him." Better than I was to her. I hope, when the dust settles. Nathan sees that I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She left, and I returned to my chair by the window, the tea now cold, untouched. I thought about all the times I had apologized for Nathan, for his absence, for his selfishness, for the little things, and for the very big ones. But tonight, for the first time, I didn't feel the need to anymore, because I finally understood something Ruth Ann had once told me. Sometimes walking away is the most generous thing we can do. And I had walked, not to hurt them, but to finally choose me. Patricia returned the next morning before the sun had climbed past the hotel roof line. I was sitting with my tea, the chipped rim warm against my lip, when her knock sounded again. She stepped in without ceremony. In her hand was a long white envelope, heavy with intention. "I know you said no," she began, "but I could not sleep." She set the envelope on the table and slid it toward me. 40,000. A cashier's check. It will cover the venue and what you canceled. Let them marry without a scandal. I looked at the envelope, not opening it. Outside, a garbage truck groaned down the lane. Life kept moving, indifferent to weddings and mothers. "Patricia," I said gently, "why do you want this so badly?" "Because I am tired of seeing her fall apart and then pretending she is fine." Her voice thinned. "Because I enabled this. Because I thought love meant smoothing every edge. I am trying to repair what I broke." I lifted the envelope. It was cool and precise, the kind of paper that believes it can solve anything. My name was typed in a serif. The number sat like a brick. "I do not hate your daughter," I said. "I do not wish her pain." "I know," she whispered. "That is why I came to you first." Something inside me tugged. The old reflex to fix, to protect, to quietly fund the chapter. I could hear Robert's steadier voice in my memory asking me to be fair. I could hear Ruth Ann telling me that a boundary is love with a backbone. I slipped a finger under the flap and lifted the check. The ink glinted. $40,000. Enough to pave over a weekend. Not enough to teach a lifetime. "Patricia," I said, and I felt my voice steady. "Money will not teach what humility can. Let them learn the cost of forgetting where they came from." She closed her eyes, a flinch then a blink. "You would make them face the guests hungry. You would let my friends think we are broke. I would let them face themselves," I answered. A long quiet filled the room. No TV. No hallway chatter. Only the hum of the air unit and the clink as my teaspoon settled in the cup. "I am not your enemy," I added. "I am a woman who has spent 3 years paying to pretend. I am done with pretending Patricia's shoulders fell. Then at least keep the check for yourself. Consider it a thank you for everything you have done." I shook my head. "Your gratitude is not a debt I plan to collect." I held the check in both hands. The paper resisted at first. I pulled slowly, giving the moment the weight it deserved. A neat tear traveled through the zeros with a hush that sounded almost like mercy. I halved it again. Smaller pieces now. White confetti without celebration. Patricia watched without interrupting. No gasp. No rush to snatch it back. Only a mother witnessing the cost of lessons learned too late. I placed the pieces in the empty saucer beside my cup. No triumph rose in me, only a stillness that felt like truth. "I will not step between your daughter and consequence," I said. "Not anymore." Patricia nodded once. "I understand." She stood, smoothed her coat, and reached for her purse. At the door, she paused. "People will judge you for this." "They already have," I said. "Half will say I am cruel. Half will say I am finally wise. Neither half knows how many nights I paid to keep quiet." Her mouth trembled into something that was almost a smile. "You are not cruel, June. You are brave in a way I was not." When she left, the room felt taller. I gathered the shredded check, carried it to the bathroom, and dropped it into the trash can. The pieces made a soft sound against the liner. I washed my hands and watched the water run clear. Back at the table, I opened my notebook. I wrote a single line under today's date. "Refusing rescue is not revenge." It is release. Then I powered on my phone. New messages bloomed across the screen. I did not listen yet. Instead, I texted Paulina one sentence: proceed with the filing. I lifted my cup and drank. The tea had cooled, but it was honest. I sat with that honesty, letting it steady me. Somewhere, a brass band practiced a march. Somewhere, a baker scraped icing off a 5-tier cake. Somewhere, my son rehearsed an apology he was not ready to speak. I set the cup down and breathed. This was the choice. Not fire, not spectacle. A quiet act that said, the lesson begins now. The documents arrived in a thick envelope, hand-delivered by a courier in a dark suit. I sat at the small desk in the hotel room, the lamp casting a narrow circle of light, and opened it with the same care I used to open Nathan's report cards when he was a boy. There it was in black and white, my name still printed, bold and undeniable, on the deed to the house. Paulina had been right. Erica had never signed anything. Nathan hadn't read the original contract carefully, and in their rush to make everything theirs, they had overlooked the simplest fact. I had never stopped being part owner. The irony almost made me laugh. Years of being invisible in that house, years of setting the table, folding their laundry when I visited, babysitting without thanks. Yet, on paper, I was still standing beside them. Invisible in life, undeniable in law. I dialed Paulina's number. She answered on the second ring, brisk and steady as always. I trust you received the papers. I did, I said, my hand resting on the deed. So it's true. Legally, I still own half. Yes, she replied. They cannot sell it without you. And more importantly, you have every right to initiate a forced sale. It will be messy for them, but clean for you. I traced my finger over the line where my name sat. June Holloway. Still present. Still counted. Paulina continued, if you want to proceed, I'll need your signature on the petition. Once filed, they'll receive notice within 48 hours. For a long moment, I said nothing. I listened to the hum of the lamp, the muffled laughter from the hallway, the faint sound of a couple arguing in the next room. Life everywhere was carrying on, while mine paused at the sharp edge of a pen. I thought of Nathan at 9, clutching his blanket in the middle of the night, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mom." I thought of Erica, standing in my kitchen just yesterday, telling me I was the greatest burden her marriage could carry. And I thought of myself, sitting quietly in corners, swallowing humiliation, convincing myself that silence was love. I picked up the pen. "Paulina," I said, my voice steady, "I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done explaining my worth." There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that holds respect. "Then sign it," she said softly. I did. Stroke by stroke, my name carved into the decision. A name that had once been spoken by a child in need, now written as a woman claiming her right. When the ink dried, I laid the pen down. For the first time in years, my hand did not shake. Paulina exhaled audibly on the other end. "I'll handle the rest. They'll be served soon." "Thank you," I murmured. "You don't owe me thanks, June. You owe yourself freedom." After the call ended, I sat back in the chair and stared at the signed petition. A strange calm settled over me. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was simply the truth catching up, written in ink, undeniable and unbent. I whispered aloud to no one but myself, I don't need them to understand. I need them to remember. I was once their mother. The words echoed in the quiet room, heavy yet healing. It wasn't about them admitting fault or offering apologies. It was about leaving behind a mark that said, I was here. I gave. I mattered. I folded the papers neatly back into the envelope and placed it on the table, beside the chipped teacup I had carried from their house. One artifact of the past. One document for the future. Both mine. I stood, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain. The city lights blinked below like stars scattered on earth. People rushing, celebrating, grieving, beginning again. I wasn't outside of that anymore. I was part of it. The house would be sold. The wedding, if it happened, would not look the way they planned. But more importantly, the woman they dismissed had drawn a line they could not erase. I closed the curtain and let the night hold me. Tomorrow would bring questions, anger, perhaps even tears. But tonight I had signed my own deliverance. And for the first time, that was enough. There was a knock I recognized before I heard it. The rhythm belonged to my son. I opened the hotel door and Nathan stood there in yesterday's shirt, eyes rimmed red, hair uncombed, the stiff confidence drained out of him. "Mom, Erica is falling apart." "Everything has collapsed," he said. He stepped inside without waiting. His hands shook, as if he had carried the whole house and finally set it down. I let the door click shut. I did not offer coffee. I did not rush to comfort him. I waited. The silence did the work I used to do with words. "She is upstairs at her mother's, crying. Guests are calling. The planner quit. People think we are broke. They think you are cruel." He swallowed hard, then added, softer, "I told them you are not." I folded my hands and looked at his face. He avoided my eyes. "Please do not sell the house," he said. "Do whatever you want to me. Do not take the house." I felt an old ache stir, the reflex to save what he loved. I let it pass like a tide and said nothing. He kept going. "We can fix this," he said. "We will apologize at the reception. We will make a speech. We will tell everyone there was a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," I said. "There was a moment of truth." He flinched. "You are angry." "I am finished explaining." He glanced toward my small suitcase, toward the chipped teacup on the table, toward the envelope stamped by the court. He saw it, then looked away. Heat rose from the paper. "What is that?" he asked. "Reality," I said. He finally met my eyes. "Mom, please. I know we have not been good. I know I should have defended you. Just give us time. We will refinance. We will add your name. We will make it right." "My name was never gone," I said. "You would have known that if you had read what you signed." His mouth opened, then closed. Confusion crossed his face. He reached for the envelope with cautious fingers, slid out the first page, and read. When he found my name, bold and undeniable, his shoulders sagged. "You are a co-owner," he whispered. "I am," I said. "And yesterday I filed to partition the property." He looked as if I had struck him. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. For a moment, he was 9 again, small and frightened, asking if we were still a family. I let the memory pass through me. Then I set it down. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked. "Because when I spoke, you did not listen. Because when I was in your house, I was a guest you tolerated. Because you believed love meant I would never use the tools available to me." He rubbed his forehead. "Erica will not survive this." "She will," I said. "People survive what they cause." "The trick is learning afterward." He shook his head. "You do not have to do this. I do not have to keep paying for your lessons either." He stood and moved closer, palms open as if to catch something that might fall. "I will go to the bank." I will ask Patricia to help. I will sell my car. Please, just give me a month, I breathed in, slow and steady. Nathan, if you do not remember who built that house, then perhaps you do not deserve to keep it. He closed his eyes like the words stung. You built it, he said, barely above a whisper. You did. No, I said. I paid for its beginning. You were supposed to build it with respect. He sank back down, emptied by the sentence. He looked at the document again, then at me. What do you want from me? He asked. Accountability, I said, and distance until you can offer it. He nodded slowly, like a man learning to walk on new ground. If I bring you a plan, he asked, will you hear it? I will listen, I said. I will not rescue. He took a long breath, folded the papers, and set them back in the envelope with unusual care. Reverence had arrived late, but it had arrived. At the door, he turned. Mom, are you safe? He asked. Yes, I said, for the first time in a long while. He left the room quietly, closing the door in the rhythm he used when he was a boy sent to bed early. I waited until the hallway was still. Then I lifted the pen Paulina had given me and signed the last page she had flagged, the one that confirmed service. The ink dried. The decision held. 2 days after Nathan's visit, an envelope slid under my hotel door. No name, no return address. Just cream-colored paper with handwriting I did not recognize. Round, careful, almost hesitant. My first thought was another notice, another plea, another attempt to reel me back into their storm. I let it sit on the floor for an hour before I picked it up. Inside was a single photograph, a baby swaddled in a hospital blanket. Her skin still flushed, her fists curled tight, her eyes closed in that vulnerable way newborns carry their entire world in silence. The edges of the photo trembled in my hand as I turned it over. On the back, written in uneven ink, her name is June. For everything you did, even when we didn't deserve it. I stared until the letters blurred. For a moment, my chest forgot how to breathe. Then it rushed back all at once, heavy and light at the same time. My name carried forward, stitched into a life I had never held. A life born out of choices I didn't control, yet somehow still tethered to me. I sat on the bed, the chipped teacup beside me, the photo trembling between my fingers. Who had sent it? Nathan, grasping for a way to bridge the chasm? Erica, offering a peace she could not speak aloud? Patricia, reaching for redemption through her granddaughter? It didn't matter, because the truth was written clearly enough. My name was not erased. No matter how many times they told me to disappear, a piece of me remained. They could strike me out of guest lists, remove my seat at tables, cancel my presence from their lives. But they had given a child my name. And that was a confession more powerful than any voicemail or apology. I pressed the photo to my chest. For years, I had feared being forgotten, the kind of forgetting that turns a mother into a shadow. But here was proof that somewhere, in the private corners of their conscience, they could not forget me. Not entirely. My thoughts circled back to the line on the back of the photo, even when we didn't deserve it. That was the apology they could not say aloud, the unspoken truth at last. I whispered into the quiet, "Her name is June. Because you could not forget me." The words steadied me, like a thread tugging me back into myself. I thought of all the nights I held Nathan through fevers, the sacrifices invisible to anyone but me, the meals skipped so his lunchbox would be full, the overtime shifts that bought textbooks and shoes. They had tried to erase those things with silence, with dismissal, with cruelty. And yet, When a child came into their world, they reached instinctively for the name of the woman who had carried them when they could not carry themselves. My name lived on. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall, not heavy, not bitter, but soft, like rain that finally cools the earth after a long drought. The photo lay in my lap, glowing under the thin shaft of sunlight that crept through the curtains. I traced the baby's outline with my fingertip, slow and reverent. I whispered a prayer for her, whoever she would grow to be, that she would learn grace earlier than her parents did, that she would know love without having to earn it through sacrifice. And maybe one day, when she asked why her name was June, someone would tell her the story. Maybe they would soften the edges. Maybe they would tell it plain. Either way, my name would still be spoken. They asked me to disappear, I murmured, holding the photograph close. And still, I remain. The teacup caught the light, its crack glistening like a scar that never healed, but also never broke entirely. The cup, the photo, the petition. They were 3 anchors of one truth. Erasure had failed. I folded the photo back into its envelope, slipped it into my notebook, and wrote beneath yesterday's entry, "A name is not easily erased when it is carved in sacrifice." When I put the pen down, I felt lighter. I did not know what tomorrow would bring: anger, reconciliation, silence. But for tonight, I had enough. Enough proof that my worth had left a mark. Enough evidence that even in forgetting they remembered. And enough strength to walk forward, carrying not just loss, but legacy. That night I turned off the lamp and sat with the photograph in my hands. The baby named after me slept inside a square of glossy paper. Her tiny mouth was pursed. Her hands were still fists. The room felt like a question. Forgiveness has a sound. It is the breath you release when no one is looking. Boundaries have a sound. It is the door you close without slamming. I listened for both and heard neither, only the pulse in my wrists and the faint hum of the air unit. Should I forgive? Should I go back? Should I save the ceremony they broke? The questions lined up like restless guests at a reception that had lost its music. I heard Erica rehearsing apologies. I saw Nathan deciding I should shrink again. I set the photograph on the table beside my chipped teacup and folded my hands. Memory arrived like weather. The cuts were not only from yesterday. They lived in the small refusals and the narrowed eyes. They lived in my sunroom turned studio, in stories cut short by a smile that said enough. I remembered the dinner when Erica laughed at my thrift store cardigan and called it quaint. Nathan stared into his glass and said nothing. I remembered the day I asked for a spare key, and she told me the smart lock could not handle too many codes. I remembered setting the table while they scrolled their phones. My chair had been moved for a decorative plant. If I went back, what would I be teaching the little girl who shares my name? That love requires a woman to erase herself in order to stay. That a mother deserves a seat only when she is paying for the meal. I pressed my palm to the table and waited for the shake to pass. The truth gathered itself like a spine. If I go back, I am teaching them that a mother can be thrown away and will return whenever called. I cannot teach that. I will not. I walked to the window and opened the curtains. The night had thinned to a soft gray. The city was yawning into morning. Somewhere a bakery mixed batter. A florist trimmed stems. A planner rewrote timelines that once relied on my quiet yes. None knew the cost of each yes I had given. I placed the photograph upright against the lamp. Her face glowed in the warm light, a tiny moon with a name I knew by heart. I spoke softly to her, a prayer more than a promise. Little one, May you grow into a woman who keeps her kindness and her edges. May you never learn love as debt. Then I sat and counted my breaths to 20. I waited for tears that did not come. Grief had already done its work. What remained was choice. Choice requires courage, patience, and a steady, honest spine. I thought about what forgiveness could look like if I did not return. It could be the check I refused to cash, the stories I refused to retell to win. It could be the distance that leaves room for growth, the silence that refuses to cover shame, the boundary that says, I will not be cruel and I will not be used. My phone lay face down on the desk. I turned it over but did not unlock it. Mercy does not require immediacy. Neither does respect. I poured hot water over a fresh tea bag and waited. Waiting is its own discipline. When the tea was ready, I lifted the cup and let the steam rise against my face. I thought of Robert, of the way he would set a hand on my shoulder and say, choose the path that keeps you whole. I thought of Ruth Ann, of her sentence that lands like a bell. Sometimes walking away is the most generous thing we can do. I'm not punishing them. I am preserving myself. I am not closing the door. I am removing the hinge that kept it swinging against my cheek. If they wish to know me later, they will find me standing, not bowing. I slid the photograph back into its envelope and tucked it into my notebook. I wrote a single line below yesterday's entry. Hold the boundary. Keep the heart. Then I turned off the lamp and let the room grow honest. The darkness did not frighten me. I had survived worse. In the quiet, I asked once more. I listened to the answer. I will not go back. I will not teach the wrong lesson. When sleep finally came, it felt like arriving home, not to a house or a table, but to the woman who would no longer forget herself to be loved. The cafe was small and bright, the kind of place where morning light lands on tile and makes chipped mugs look like artifacts. I picked a corner table with my back to the wall. I wanted a clear view of the door and an easy exit. This was not a reunion or a surrender. It was a checkpoint. I would measure the distance between who they were and who they might become. Nathan arrived first, hat in hand, eyes lowered. Erica followed 2 paces behind, hair pulled back, no makeup, a cardigan that did not pretend at elegance. She looked younger, not flattering young, but stripped of certainty. We sat. A barista set down water with a soft clink that sounded louder than it should. Erica spoke before Nathan could. Her hands shook on the table. I was cruel because I thought you were replaceable. I thought kindness meant weakness. She swallowed, eyes fixed on the seam between floor tiles. I was wrong. Nathan's jaw moved, but he did not speak. I waited. Silence used to frighten me. Now it was ballast. Erica lifted her gaze. I wanted to win, a house that looked like a life I had not earned. I wanted to be the woman who did not need anyone, least of all the woman who reminded me how I got there. When I told you to disappear, I was really telling myself I did not want a mirror. She exhaled. I am sorry. The apology sat between us like a hot cup no one dared to touch. I kept my voice level. I am not here to save your wedding or your house. I am not here to set the table again, so you can forget who said it. I came to see if you can stand without leaning on me. Erica nodded. Not the tight nod of defense, but the slow bow of someone meeting truth. We will figure out the reception, she said. We will explain the cancellations. We will tell the truth. There is also the petition, I said. It was filed. She winced. Nathan finally looked up. We know, he said. We got served yesterday. He cleared his throat. I do not want to fight you. I want to fix this, and I do not know how. You begin with honesty, I said. You learn what you can afford, in money and in character. You remember who helped you breathe when life knocked the wind out. The barista passed again with a tray of cinnamon rolls. The air sweetened. None of us reached for one. Erica folded her hands. We do not need your money. We need you. Her voice thinned, but she held it. Not as a purse, as a person. As Nathan's mother, I felt something shift. Not a softening, but a settling. Needing me looks like respect, I said. It looks like boundaries honored and rooms where I am not treated like a shadow. It looks like paying your own bills and accepting when the answer is no. We can do that, Nathan said. You can try, I answered. Trying begins with consequences. The petition stands. If you want to buy my share, bring a plan that does not rest on me. Erica nodded. We will bring a plan. She swallowed. May we also bring the baby when she is cleared for outings. A small door opened in my chest. I kept my tone even. Ask again when the plan is in my hands. We finally ordered coffee. The mugs arrived thick and warm, steam curling upward like thin prayers. For a minute, we drank in silence. I believed kindness meant you would never leave, Nathan said, voice rough. I see now it meant you should have left sooner. I left when I remembered myself, I said. The timing is what it is. Erica reached into her purse and pulled out a folded page. This is a draft budget. First pass. No dining out. No new clothes. We sell the second car. I start part-time at a dental office. It is not enough yet, but it is honest. I read it, then set it down. Honesty is a start. Sustained honesty is the work. Nathan nodded. We will send the full plan to your attorney this week. Do that, I said. I pushed back my chair. I will not hug you goodbye. Not yet. I am not punishing you. I am protecting the lesson. Erica's eyes shone, but she did not reach for me. Thank you for meeting us. I stood, paid for the coffee, and stepped into the morning. The light felt different. Not brighter, just clearer. The choice remained with me. Behind me, the bell over the cafe door chimed, and I walked forward without looking back. I met Paulina the following Monday. The conference room smelled of copier toner and new folders. Sunlight laid a rectangle across the table. She slid a stack of papers toward me, tabs like flags. I read each page slowly, the way I used to read to children who needed patience. When I reached the last tab, I closed the file and set my palm on the cover. I will sell my share, I said. No discounts, no favors. If they buy at fair market value by the deadline, good. If not, we list. Paulina studied me, searching for regret and not finding any. You are choosing clarity, she said. I respect that. I am choosing a life that is mine. Prepare the notice. Give them 30 days for a clean buyout. After that, put the house on the market. She wrote the dates in her neat block script. I have not seen anyone let go with strength, she said. Most people tug the rope as it burns their hands. My hands have burned enough, I answered. We signed. Outside, autumn had crept into the air. The city smelled of wet leaves. I drove to a community on the edge of town where sidewalks were wide and porches faced west. A director named Alma walked me past a citrus courtyard, a library with tall windows, and a room where women quilted in a circle. We have walking groups, writing hours, a pool, she said. You look like a reader. I am also a teacher, I said. Alma smiled. We always need both. I chose a corner unit that caught the afternoon light. It had a narrow balcony and room for a table, one chair, and a lemon tree in a clay pot. I signed a short lease. That evening, I brewed tea, set the chipped cup on the railing, and watched the sun fold behind the roofs. The next morning, I drove to the county office and filled out forms to volunteer as a literacy mentor. At the shelter for girls aging out of foster care, the program manager paired me with 3 teens. We met in a classroom. I brought secondhand paperbacks, sticky notes, and patience. Their names were Lena, Harbor, and Shay. They spoke fast and guarded at first. Then the stories opened. Lena traced sentences with her finger. Harbor drew anchors in the margins when she understood a clause. Shay pretended not to care, then stayed 10 minutes late every time. I taught them how to find the subject of a sentence. They taught me how to stand in a room without apologizing for taking space. When we finished the first book, I bought lemon bars from the bakery near the community. We celebrated with napkins and powdered sugar. Shay asked why my cup had a crack. "Because it has been well loved," I said. She nodded like I had told her a secret she already knew. At night, I wrote letters to myself on thick stationery. Not affirmations, records. I listed the bills I no longer paid for other people, the hours I gave to girls who needed a witness, the ways my breath felt steady when I woke. I slept without checking my phone. Nathan emailed 2 drafts of a financing plan. I forwarded them to Paulina and answered with 1 sentence: "Submit to council." The 3rd draft arrived with numbers that finally added up. Still, I did not race to reply. Boundaries work best without fanfare. 30 days moved the way a tide moves. Sure, unconcerned with who begs it to return. On the final morning, Paulina called. "Funds cleared," she said. "Your share will wire this afternoon." I thanked her and set the phone down beside the lemon tree. The transfer chimed into my account like a bell. Not fortune, but freedom. I did not buy anything extravagant. I bought a sturdy pair of walking shoes, a year of bus passes, fresh notebooks, and a bookshelf for the girls' paperbacks. I paid the first month for a room at the community center where we could meet on Saturdays. That night, I stood on my balcony and counted porch lights flicking on across the complex, one by one. Warm squares in the dark, small proofs that lives were continuing. I did not feel triumphant. I felt placed. I whispered thank you so much to Alma, to Paulina, to the girls, to the woman I had finally decided to be. Wind moved through the lemon leaves, clean and almost sweet. I lifted my cup and let the steam rise. Somewhere, a playlist waited for a dance that would not happen the same way. Somewhere, a child with my name slept without knowing the soil that had been tilled for her. I closed my eyes and chose tomorrow. The air in Marigold Bay had a scent I had never known before, like saltwater and lavender, warm sunlight, and old memories finally laid to rest. Mornings began with a walk along the coast, where I watched seagulls trace their freedom across an endless sky. No one here knew who I used to be. They only knew who I chose to become. I'd wake up early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My knees still ached, and my back made its complaints known from time to time. But they didn't matter. I'd stretch slowly in the morning light that poured through my little blue cottage windows, the same shade of blue as the sea I now called home. I had filled the cottage with things that mattered. Books I loved, a teapot that whistled like it remembered me, paintings I picked up at local markets, and flowers, always flowers. I planted wild daisies along the white fence and roses beneath the windows. They bloomed like they were trying to catch up for years of silence. One afternoon, I sat on the front porch, a cup of peppermint tea in my hand and a shawl around my shoulders. The wind was soft. A group of children passed by, their laughter trailing like music. One of them, a little girl with dark curls and wide eyes, slowed down and stared at me like I was someone worth knowing. She stepped forward shyly. "Are you someone's grandma?" I smiled. "I suppose I am." To some people, she tilted her head. "Do they live here with you?" "No," I said gently. "They don't." She frowned. "Aren't you lonely without a family?" That question could have gutted me once. There was a time I would have folded under its weight. But now, I simply smiled again and looked out toward the sea. "Let me tell you something," I said, patting the seat beside me. She climbed up next to me, legs swinging off the porch. I waited a moment, listening to the waves before I spoke. Family is not just who shares your blood. It's where people remember your name, not where they ask you to forget who you are, just to fit in. She blinked at me like she wasn't sure she understood, but I could tell the words planted a seed. "My mom says I talk too much," she whispered. "Well," I leaned closer. "Maybe the world needs more people who know how to speak." She grinned, her teeth still too big for her mouth, and hopped down. "I'll remember that." I watched her run to her friends, my chest warm with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that comes from fixing things or getting apologies, but the kind that arrives when you stop needing either. I no longer watched the phone or checked for messages that never came. I stopped counting birthdays missed or letters never sent. I had stopped explaining myself, stopped justifying my choices. I no longer needed them to understand. I had understood myself. There was something unshakably sacred in that. One evening, I walked barefoot along the beach, letting the waves kiss my ankles. The sun dipped low, painting the water in hues of gold and fire. I thought of the garage I had once opened, how it had unlocked more than just a secret. It had unlocked me. The map in my husband's safe hadn't just led to money. It had led to freedom. Not just financial, but emotional, spiritual. And I had taken it, step by trembling step, until it no longer trembled. Now, every sunrise was mine. Every meal I cooked was for joy, not obligation. Every photo on my wall was chosen, not imposed. My life was no longer something I endured. It was something I curated. The women at the cafe where I sometimes wrote letters, none of them knew my past. But they knew I loved almond croissants and always tipped the barista with a joke. That was enough. The librarian in town always saved me mystery novels. The flower seller gave me tulips without asking why. They didn't need a story. They just offered kindness. That was all the family I needed. I had learned that closure didn't come from confrontation. Sometimes it came quietly, in the middle of an ordinary day, when you realized you had nothing left to prove, nothing left to beg for. Some people spend their lives chasing peace from people who refuse to give it. I had simply decided to stop chasing. My cottage stood behind me, small, strong, mine. The sea stretched before me, wide, forgiving, eternal. And inside me, a quiet voice I had once silenced whispered clearly now. "You are enough." For the first time in decades, I believed her. The envelope came in the middle of a quiet Tuesday, slipped under the door like it had something to be ashamed of. I found it when I went to check the front porch light, thinking maybe the bulb had blown again. But there it was, cream-colored cardstock with soft gold lettering. My name was written in Erica's handwriting. Neat, controlled, no emotion in the script. I sat at the kitchen table, cup of tea still warm in my hands, and just looked at it for a while. My thumb traced the fold, but I didn't open it right away. I suppose part of me already knew what it was. When I finally did peel it open, I was right. A birthday invitation. It was for the baby, for Amelia, her first birthday. A celebration I never thought I'd be invited to after what had happened. There was no note, no apology, no explanation, just one line printed at the bottom of the card, under the pastel balloon design and the time and date. We'd like you to come. No expectations, just presence. That was it. Not we miss you. Not we were wrong. Not even we'd like to make things right. Just presence. I read that line over and over. At first, I didn't know how to feel. It was so neutral, so intentionally stripped of emotion that it somehow said more than if it had tried too hard. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't an olive branch wrapped in guilt. It was, what was the word, measured. They weren't begging, but they were reaching. I set the card down and walked to the window, watching the garden sway in the breeze. The same roses I had once planted for Erica's wedding bouquet were still growing there, stubbornly blooming even after all this time. I thought about how life doesn't stop just because people decide to turn their backs. I thought about Amelia, this little girl who didn't ask for any of the history that clung to her family like dust on old furniture. And I thought about Erica. This wasn't her groveling. This was something else. Something softer. She was letting me decide. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't pretending the past hadn't happened. She was just inviting me in. It made me realize something. There's a kind of courage in not apologizing with words, but with gestures. In saying, come, without conditions. In making space, even if that space still held tension and silence. Maybe Erica hadn't found the right words, or maybe she knew there weren't any. Maybe this was her way of saying, I don't know how to fix it, but I still want you there. And that mattered. It didn't undo the pain. It didn't erase the echo of, we're not your nurses, or the cold absence after I left. But it was a beginning, a small, quiet beginning. I didn't RSVP, not yet. I didn't pick up the phone or send an email or write a note. I just tucked the invitation into the corner of the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower, and I let it sit there. I needed time, not to decide if I would go, but to decide how. The cardigan still smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. It was the one Robert had bought me for our 25th anniversary. Soft blue wool, buttons like little polished stones. I hadn't worn it in years, but that morning, as I stood in front of the mirror, it called to me, not for nostalgia, but for grounding. I go as I am, I whispered, not to be seen, not to be needed, just to be. The birthday party was at the same house I once helped pay for. The porch had new paint, but the cracks on the step were still there, hairline reminders of the things they never bothered to fix. I stood at the bottom for a moment, invitation in one hand, courage in the other. Then I walked up, not like a mother returning, not like a guest of obligation. I walked in as a woman who chose herself. The door opened before I could knock. It was Erica. She looked different, less styled, more real. No high heels, just flats, her hair tied back simply. There were faint smudges under her eyes like she'd cried recently, or maybe hadn't slept well. Hi, she said. No drama, no trembling voice. Hello, Erica. A beat passed. She stepped aside and held the door open. Come in. Inside, the house was decorated with pastel banners and balloons shaped like suns and moons. I could hear the faint giggle of children and the low hum of conversation. But when I stepped into the living room, the chatter dipped. Several heads turned. I nodded politely. No one rushed over, and I didn't expect them to. This wasn't about being welcomed with applause. This was about choosing presence. Nathan appeared in the hallway with Amelia on his hip. The baby wore a yellow dress and a single ribbon in her hair. When she saw me, she stared with that blank curiosity only a 1-year-old can carry. No judgment, just wonder. June, he said. You came. I gave a small smile. Yes, thank you for the invitation. He didn't hug me. I didn't offer one. But his eyes softened. Just a little. I spent the next few minutes sipping tea, standing near the bookshelf I once dusted when they were too busy to notice. I didn't make small talk. I didn't reintroduce myself. I just stood. And then, something small happened. Erica came into the room, carrying the teapot. She poured a fresh cup into a familiar mug. Blue rim, slightly chipped. It was the one I used to use. Without a word, she set it on the coffee table in front of me. No fanfare, no apology, but I saw her hands. They were steady, deliberate. That was enough. I took the cup, let the warmth bleed through my fingers. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Sometimes silence is a kind of language, especially between women who've both learned to carry pain without spilling it. I didn't stay long. Just long enough for 1 cup of tea, a glance at the cake, and a smile at the little girl who bore my name. Before I left, I walked into the hallway, the one where my photo used to hang. It was gone now, but I didn't look for it. I wasn't there to be remembered. I was there to remember who I was. I took a small card from my purse and placed it gently on the console table near the door. No envelope, no signature, just my handwriting, clean and sharp. Teach her to say thank you and never make someone disappear just because they were kind. Then I slipped out quietly, the same way I had slipped away from their lives once before. But this time, it wasn't an exile. It was a choice, a boundary, a lesson, and most of all, it was a return without surrender. Dear Ruth Ann, I promised you I'd write. You said you wanted to hear how it all turned out, if there was a ribbon tied neatly at the end, or just frayed edges held together with grace. Well, here I am, a cup of tea by my side and your voice in my mind. You'll be glad to know I went to the party. I didn't expect anything, and that helped. No swelling music, no grand gestures, no apologies, spoken or written. Just a room with balloons, cake, and a little girl in a yellow dress who didn't yet know the weight of legacy or disappointment. She toddled right into me with sticky fingers and wide eyes and said, "Hi, Grandma June." She didn't ask who I was. She didn't need to be told what I'd done or what I hadn't. She just knew my name. And you know what? That was enough. There's something strange about getting older, isn't there? You think the answers will come wrapped in clarity. But more often, they arrive in soft confusions, things that make no sense and still feel exactly right. No one said sorry. Not Erica, not Nathan. They didn't bring it up. They didn't try to rewrite history or pretend it didn't sting. And I didn't ask for it. I didn't even wait for it. That part surprised me. I thought I'd need the words, that somehow the pain wouldn't settle unless I heard it aloud, that they knew what they had done. But somewhere between the letter they never wrote and the tea she poured in silence, I realized I didn't need an apology. I needed peace. And peace, Ruthann, doesn't come when others finally understand. It comes when you stop needing them to. I used to imagine apologies like rain, cleansing, necessary. But maybe they're more like wind. You can feel them in gestures, in softened eyes, in space made for your name again. After I left the party, I walked by the ocean. The tide was low, and the moon hung heavy and honest in the sky. I thought about how long I spent waiting to be seen, heard, acknowledged. How long I thought love meant sacrificing everything just to keep the peace. But peace shouldn't come at the cost of yourself. Do you remember that thing you told me? The real apology is change. Well, they haven't changed entirely, not yet. But something in them shifted. I saw it, felt it. And even if it doesn't become a full transformation, I don't carry the weight of their growth anymore. That's theirs to tend now. Mine is to live. I've been volunteering at the shelter every Thursday. Shay, the quiet one I told you about, wrote her first poem last week. It wasn't perfect. It didn't rhyme, but it was raw and honest, and hers. And when she read it aloud, her hands stopped shaking. That's something, isn't it? There's joy here. Simple, quiet joy. In the way the lemon tree leans toward the sun every morning. In the way the neighbors leave books in the little free library outside my door. In the way my name, June, is said without tension again. I think about that baby sometimes, about how she wrapped her arms around my neck without hesitation. She didn't know what I had lost or what I had given. She only knew presence. And presence, Ruthann, that's what matters now. Not the wounds, not the wrongs, but the fact that I stood still long enough to let life find me again. I didn't go back to reclaim a title or to reopen wounds. I went because the version of me who left deserved to see how far she'd come. And the version of me now? She's free. They may never say, I'm sorry. And honestly, if they did, it might feel too polished, too late. I've stopped waiting for it. What I listen for now are different sounds. The baby's giggle. The sound of pages turning in a library. The soft scrape of a chair pulled out for me, without being asked. The sigh I let go of when I realize, I made it. Tell me how your tomatoes are growing. Send me a photo of your new porch swing. And if you ever forget what forgiveness looks like without the words, remember this. Sometimes it arrives dressed as a child who calls your name without knowing what it cost you to still carry it. All my love. June. The sun was just beginning to rise when I stepped barefoot onto my little porch, lemon tree in one hand, watering can in the other. The air was gentle, still carrying a trace of coolness from the night. And the sky, soft pink and gold, looked like a promise I hadn't asked for, but was grateful to receive. My lemon tree had grown fuller in recent weeks, leaves turning a deeper green, tiny buds beginning to peek from the tips. I bent down and poured the water slowly, watching as the soil darkened and the roots drank deeply. A few bees wandered lazily around the blossoms. Life, I thought, doesn't ask permission to bloom. As I stood up, something on the edge of the doormat caught my eye. It was a small, folded piece of paper, lined notebook paper, torn from a spiral pad. In the corner, a smudged crayon drawing of a book, and next to it, a heart. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It belonged to Shay, the quietest girl in my Thursday literacy group. I unfolded it carefully. Miss, June, you are the first person who ever believed I could read a whole book. You never laughed when I got scared. You just waited. Thank you for waiting. I will keep trying. Shay. I read it twice before I sat down on the porch step and let the morning wrap itself around me. She didn't know how many people I'd once waited on, how long I'd held open doors for people who never looked back. But somehow, she understood the part that mattered most, that sometimes believing in someone, quietly, steadily, is enough to change them, and sometimes it's enough to change you. There was a time I measured my worth by who wanted me near, by the roles I played: mother, helper, fixer, background support. I gave and gave, thinking it would make me indispensable, but all it made me was invisible, until I chose not to be anymore, until I walked away not out of anger, but out of clarity, until I stopped waiting to be chosen, and chose myself instead. Now, I spend my days planting things and watching them grow. Not just roses and lemons, but words and confidence, stitched quietly into the lives of young women who haven't yet learned how to take up space, and maybe never had someone show them they could. I don't keep score anymore. I don't count who calls or who doesn't, who sends cards on holidays, or who still pretends I'm just some footnote in their story. Because I've stopped trying to prove I belong in places that only loved me when I stayed small. These days, I take up the space that was always mine. I wear the blue cardigan because I like the way it makes me feel, not because it reminds me of someone who used to love me. I drink tea from the cup with the chipped rim, not because it's sentimental, but because it still works. And so do I. I answer to June. Just June. No qualifiers, no apologies. And when I walk through town, sometimes people smile and nod, not because they owe me anything, but because they see me fully. That's what healing looks like. It's not always loud. It doesn't come with music swelling or a montage of hugs and second chances. Sometimes it comes in a child's note, a thriving lemon tree, a day that begins and ends without grief biting at the edges. I placed Shay's note inside the old recipe tin I now use for keepsakes. It sits on my bookshelf, nestled beside stories I once thought I'd forgotten how to tell. Not long ago, someone asked me if I ever regretted not fighting harder to be included again, if I ever wanted to be welcomed back into the fold, into the holidays, the traditions, the photos. I said no, because I've learned that being welcomed isn't the same as being wanted. And I'd rather build something new with people who choose me freely than beg for space at a table I helped build, only to be told to eat in the kitchen. I used to be the one who stayed behind to do the dishes, who made sure everyone was fed, who tucked everyone in and asked for nothing. Now I pour water into roots I planted. Now I receive notes from girls who see me as a starting line, not an afterthought. They asked me to disappear. I did. But I reappeared, in places they'll never forget.